Welcome to today's webinar, Everyone is Naked, aka Presenting with Pizazz, not Palpitations. This webinar was originally presented back in June, but due to technical issues was not recorded. I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker, David Curtis, Principal at CVDC. David trained as a careers advisor almost 20 years ago and since then has been in the business of helping people, most often in a careers context, but both here and in Toronto. He is currently operating his own CV writing and career coaching business. I'd now like to hand you over to David.
Thank you very much, Julie. Hello, everybody. Although that's slightly weird to say. Hello, everybody who's now watching this on the UnLtd YouTube channel. Very nice to be here. Thank you for your introduction, Julie. Yeah, everybody is naked. It's a little bit of a cliched type, well, more than a little bit. It's a very cliched notion that if you're extremely nervous going into a presentation, then you imagine everybody is naked. I do want to assure you that nobody in that picture, there's nothing graphic that you'll see. So, and I'm definitely wearing clothes, not that you can see me. Anyway,
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Let's swiftly move on. Thank you again, Julie. Let's look at the agenda for today. There's a number of things, hopefully, that are going to be clear and simple that we'll get through. So point one, why are we all here? Forming the objective. That's key because you need to make sure that you're giving the group of people who are sat so eagerly in front of you what they want. And sometimes it can pay to ask them some questions about that first. Once you've done that, you're in a good position to form a rock-solid, razor-sharp, laser-guided, finely honed objective. I hope I made that last bit very clear. Your objective needs to be very, very solid so that indeed the people who are listening to you know exactly where they're going. Next up in our presentation today, we're going to look at the content. Now, once you've got your objective, you can go ahead and create the presentation built with that objective always at the top of your mind and ask yourself continually, does your content serve your objective? This is all about making something as finely honed as possible, lean and mean, with no excess fat. Excuse the butcher's metaphor there, particularly if you're vegetarian. The third thing we'll look at is delivery. It's all about you, and then it's all about the audience. In other words, you need to be authentic, and I'll say that many times. Authenticity for yourself is the key. Obviously, how you come across is down to you. There are various things which can affect an audience's perception of you, but ultimately, the next point about this is that you're not doing the presentation for yourself, you're doing it for the audience. And so the section that we'll look at here, this third section, is really making sure that whatever you're saying and showing them works for them. And with them, you need to work with them to make that happen. Number four, well, almost at the end, we're not going to have, I think because of the situation, the questions are going to be reserved, but normally at this point I would ask for any questions. And then finally, we're going to end up with what do you want them to walk away with, your audience. So for you as a presenter, you need to leave them with a clear message. And the end of your presentation needs to be very strong. And so essentially how I've ordered that agenda is very much how I would like you to think about your own presentations. Okay. Now, if you like, and I'll come back to this too, if you forget everything else, ultimately, I would like you to remember these two key things. Prepare thoroughly, and that involves asking what the audience needs, planning, creating, rehearsing, and thereby knowing your audience, having a clear objective, your structure will be clear, and that will follow through into the content. The second point is, as I've said, be your authentic self, and you'll be absolutely fine. let's go into the first part of our agenda. Why are we all here? We're going to look at the process of how you, as the presenter, can create an objective for your presentation, whatever that might be. Okay, how to form your objective. A good thing to start with is to ask yourself and your audience, what is the purpose of your presentation? For example, are you making a sales pitch for your own enterprise? Are you responding to a client's request for a presentation to their stakeholders? Whatever it might be, you need to have a very clear idea of your overall purpose of presentation. And as I've already mentioned, talking to key stakeholders about that can often be very much an important part of that as well. Have the end in mind. Think about that impact that you want at the end, the message that you want them to leave with. There's often a little bit of a war of attrition between the information that you give them, how much is taken in, and then finally, and perhaps some would say most important, what action leads from that. So they're going to come to your presentation, and ultimately, probably, you want them to go away and do something with it. So having that in mind is also very important. What impact are you hoping to have on the audience there? And this will probably come as no surprise. The objective needs to be concrete and specific, and following a smart goal: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, that whole SMART thing, you've got to sometimes watch out for that, because there are different variants that can make letters do the similar thing. But essentially, you need to make it a very tightly bound objective. So let's have a little look at how that might come about. When you're formulating an objective, these are some of the questions excuse me, that you might ask. Why am I making this presentation? What exactly am I trying to achieve? Why has my audience come here? Again, speaking to them about that is good. What is my audience expecting of me? What do I want my audience to know? And also maybe, what do I want my audience to think, possibly even feel? As far as your actual objectives themselves, the best way to create them is to ask yourself these kind of logical questions. And the answers will form the basis for that objective. There's no real limit to the questions you can ask. Those are just a few samples there. Once you've answered those questions, you should have enough information to formulate a SMART objective. And when you've created that specific enough objective, you can begin to plan the content. Now, I've said something quite key there: planning the content, not necessarily creating it. And we'll talk very much more about that in just a second. So here's an example I hope works for you. So this is taking, formulating an objective from something quite general to something more specific. So in terms of this, I could say, well, I want my presentation to be memorable. As we can tell straight away, that doesn't really conform to any SMART structure. It's not very specific at all, for example. That is getting there. So after 1 month, so that's measurable, it's time-bound, participants will be able to articulate 3 key learnings, very specific, one from each section of the presentation, and apply it in a customer-facing setting. Now, for that, I would necessarily need to do some follow-up and evaluation to see if indeed that had applied. But that there is, you're getting much more to the crux of it, of getting something much more specific. Now, what we'll look at here is my objective for you. Now, this hasn't suddenly changed into a Welsh language presentation, and that could possibly be the worst acronym ever now I look at it. But If we were all in a room together, I would ask for suggestions as to what this might stand for, just for fun. And there it is. So the first part, by the end of this session, participants will be able to immediately utilize this framework and resources to logically develop, create, and deliver their future presentations, and do so with increased confidence. And as I said, that's my objective to you. Now, the overarching theme of making any presentation, it's all about the preparation. And so as we move into kind of the next section, I just want to emphasize that figuring out your objective is absolutely a key part of being prepared. It does create the internal logic of what you're trying to do. And it also puts you in touch with your audience and their needs, and as such will help for a more authentic you. It's really worth spending time on. Okay, let's now start to look at content. Plan the structure first is the first point on there. And from bitter experience, I can assure you it's not a good move to open whatever software you're using, just plunge in and start to grab different visuals, write your text and so on, creating what you might think are fantastic looking slides. Without a structure in place, you'll only waste time editing. Lots of time. As I say, bitter experience. Now, what will best serve your audience is a question I've asked there. Your audience is going to respond to a variety of different media, and it's a good idea to have a mix of that in your presentation. To that end, make sure that whatever you use, your graphics and so on, it must support and reinforce the message. Illustrate, great. Distract, absolutely not. And sometimes you see something and it could be something that makes you laugh. It might be a lovely photograph, whatever it might be. If it's not really supporting your key messages, then you're probably better off getting rid of it. And finally, in terms of the content, we'll look at a way to figure out how your timings are built in according to the material that you've got. Now, first up, as I've said before, we definitely need a plan. Plan the structure first. I will confess at this point, structure is not necessarily my strong suit. Yeah, I said that. My strength rather is connecting with people, and in this context, actually presenting the presentation. So I have to say that in this particular instance, I'm really grateful to a gentleman called Dan Steer and his wonderful blog, to which I have included a link in the list of resources at the end, just for some of these rather key tips. I went too far there. Let's go back one second. Sorry about that. There we are. Okay, so Dan Steer's blog, which I think is where I got this from, suggested the following. Begin with a clear introduction that gives your message immediately and points to the structure that will follow. Develop the points of your message in a logical order in the body of your presentation. At transition points, refer back to your main message. If you have a formal question time, put it before your closing section. You'll note, perhaps, that I have indeed done that in this one. And to close, summarize what you said and finish by repeating your main message. And of course, all of that is in order to ensure that whatever you're trying to say, it's boiled down and it's getting through to your audience. Now, once you've got your structure, you can start to assemble the content. Again, must serve your purpose. On the next slide, let's maybe get perhaps a little bit controversial. Looking at content, what will best serve your audience? As I said in my introduction, You've got to be authentic, and it's all about you. But then once you've got that down, you are there to serve your audience. Now, you need to ask what kind of modes of delivery might suit your audience. What's the overall aim of your session? Are you looking to inform, educate, persuade? This comes from Wikipedia, my friends, so it must be true. There are substantial criticisms of learning styles approaches from scientists who have reviewed extensive bodies of research. Indeed, the weight of evidence against learning styles should imbue teachers, instructional designers, trainers, professors, and all educational and learning professionals, that's you, with strong skepticism about using learning styles approaches in attempts to improve learning outcomes. Now, all of this is to say that, of course, in different times we will, and depending on what we're doing, there will be a way in which we take on information, and there will be a way in which we prefer to do that. So it's not to throw all of that out of the window. It is, however, to kind of caution you, suggest that clearly a balanced approach is in order. But again, think very much about what it is that you're going to do, what kind of audience is there, and your research before asking those questions is going to be important in that regard as well. Provided you have time, I do understand that sometimes you don't always have as much time as you would like to conduct that, but wherever you can, finding out who the people are that you're working with and presenting to, it's very, very important if you can do that in order to get the material across in the way that's going to really help them. Okay, after you've done your research, and again, hopefully you've got time to do that, you'll have the power to put in the different methods and the visuals and so on that you see fit. Now, what follows are 3 examples which I think illustrate very well some useful points on content. Now, I believe, hopefully, that this is a well, let me just a bit of a preamble. I was searching for an image that conveyed how a connection to both logical and emotional responses in an audience can be very powerful if you can link those 2 things together. And when I found the illustration that you'll see in a second, I thought, that's interesting. It looks relevant. It's got social enterprise written on it for a start. I'll use that. But here's another confession. It does also kind of break the rule that I've given above. It doesn't really show what I want it to. Now, that's not to say that it's completely random. It's just that I've had to augment it to make it fit what I wanted to say. Well, I don't hear you ask, but maybe you would if you were with me. Well, okay, David, so why are you using it? Well, I'm glad you asked that. I had another look at the text that it came from, and you'll see there's a link to the article at the bottom of the page there, which you'll be able to click on. I had a look at that text, and not to get too kind of meta about this, but when I read the story that accompanied the image, I really wanted to include it in the content section. Why is that? Okay, because telling a story in terms of your content is it's a key component in your armory if you want to put across something really compelling. And I thought that this, we'll get to it in a second, would illustrate 2 ideas at once. One is the power of a compelling visual and the power of a good story. Okay, let's have a look at what we've got here. So that's the illustration that I saw, and that's my little augmentation, joining the head and the heart. Now, if you'll allow me, and of course you will, because I have all the power at the moment, this is an excerpt of what Neil McLean of Social Enterprise Academy Scotland wrote, reflecting on a presentation that he witnessed as part of the 2014 Social Enterprise World Forum. He said, at one of the workshops I attended, a familiar face from the States was speaking. Happened to be Kevin Lynch, CEO of the Social Enterprise Alliance. He goes on, bear in mind that many people these days are talking about cultivating social innovation. Incubators are springing up all over the place. European policy is moving from social enterprise towards social innovation, and investment discussion is also considering this new phenomenon. I was intrigued to find out more. So when I slipped in the door to my workshop slightly late, you can imagine my surprise. At the very moment I sit myself down, I hear, okay, so what is social enterprise? Really? 19 years after the term was published in Ledbetter's book, we're still talking about this? That's it, I'm leaving. Going back to the networking room for some more cookies and chat. But before I did, he produced a picture that stopped me. It looked something like this. And the picture that I've put up there, ladies and gentlemen, is the one that he's referring to, the original kind of postcard note. It showed how social innovation is a function of the head. Social entrepreneurship is a function of the heart. And social enterprise is the thing, the body, if you will, that carries these things around. Suddenly, the connections made sense. Now, then Neil MacLean goes on to discuss other thinking on this, but, and forgive me, this is rather lengthy, but I just want to drive this home. His conclusion demonstrates why the connection he felt on seeing that image was so powerful. He wrote, maybe if we think about it in this way, we can allow genuine collaboration of these three types of people, in and across different types of organizations, to work in genuine partnership, all of which are critical if we're going to affect real social change. Now, as social entrepreneurs, isn't that the raison d'etre? No more, no less. Even acknowledging the triple bottom line, you know that Neil isn't alone in his belief that social change is the only driving force for many social entrepreneurs. And this is the image that made it all come together for him. Now, true, the presenter hadn't personally asked Neil what he wanted from the presentation, but he clearly knew his audience well enough. Experience in that case can count for a lot. Let's move on. Now, for me, perhaps this illustrates better the idea of head and heart, at least in a more immediate way. It's a fairly busy diagram when you first look at it. There's quite a bit going on, but I think a strong example, and also related to the previous slide's theme, and illustrates for me the idea that change can be effected when all three elements, knowledge, passion, and organization, work in concert. There's one more that I'd like to show you. And this last example is of a simple but effective use of image and comes from Nancy Duarte. I hope I've said that correctly. Sparklines are her way of mapping presentation structures. And she, as a graphic designer, uses sparklines to analyze famous speeches graphically in her book called Resonate, of which there's a link on the resources page as well. She argues that the very best speeches succeed because they contrast our ordinary world with an ideal, improved world. They compare what is with what could be. Now, for me, that sounds aspirational. Now, we must also aspire to keep to time. So, let's look at how, as I mentioned earlier, your content will also relate to the amount of time that you spend on each different part. This is the final slide in the content section, and it's really a kind of a suggested presentation structure in one neat diagram. Once again, I've included a link to where this came from, and I think no matter, the reason I like it is there aren't any actual times tied to it. It's all about the percentages. So whether you've got half an hour or half a day or whatever it might be, you can sort of help. That will help you, I think, figure out how long you want to spend on the different parts of your content. Okay, just to wrap up on this section then, structuring your content is a huge part of you being prepared. For example, you're not going to necessarily memorize your entire presentation, but you might be able to recall your key transition points. And these in turn might act as triggers. And if your technology failed, and you have to be prepared for everything, folks, if your technology failed, that will at least enable you to pull out your main messages and get those across. Your content is your chance to illustrate the points that you really want to make. Okay, now, probably the bit that gives most people the most grey hairs. Delivery. Yeah. Okay. The time is coming. You're getting ready to walk out in front of your audience. Let's breathe deeply. I don't mean that in any kind of sarcastic way. I think, as I'll probably mention, I think shortly, mindfulness, which I know is a rather, I don't know whether it's an abused term these days, but it's certainly very popular. Mindfulness and meditation. That practice of being able to be very, very present on what you're doing and focused and ignoring the extraneous thoughts, I think can be very useful if you're working as a presenter. And I said right at the top as well that you as a person, you need to have that authentic approach. I've said that. I'll say it again as well. I think it is really, really key. There's no use trying to pretend to be somebody else. An audience is going to warm to you. And I hope that the quote that's on the screen now, I think it sums up nicely the fact that you need to consider how you're perceived in that room. And then remember that you're there to give something to the audience. Now, they're only going to receive that if they perceive you to be trustworthy, if they can do business with you, if they like you. And I think sometimes those different factors come together. Well, okay, let's find out then. What type of presenter are you? Do any of these strike a chord? I think that perhaps it would be nice to draw upon various modes for all of us, as and when desired. You know, a huge kind of energy, complete Zen-like calm, whatever it might be. Again, the authenticity is so important, though. We can't all be presenter warriors. It's just not feasible. So I must say that the woman in black and white does look rather terrified, though. I'm just wondering then, what makes you frightened? Let's have a look at a few common fears. Yeah, I'm really, really nervous. Well, that's a good thing in many ways. And the preparation that we've talked about will deal with a lot of your nerves. Being early on the day is a very good start. But think about the fact that this is in your head, and ask, what exactly is it that I'm worried about? It's all up in there, up in your head. What's going on? And one way that people can deal with it is to channel it into some sort of physical activity. That could be as simple as connecting with your breath, back to the mindfulness approach. It could be taking a walk outside once you've got to the venue nice and early, you're set up, confident that everything's working, take a walk. Now, tech. It certainly happened to me, and if you've done any kind of presentation before, you may be listening to this and it might be your first time. I'm not going to say you can guarantee that it will happen, but you need to prepare for the fact that very often the technology, not very often, sometimes technology will not work. So you need to make sure you've got backup options. You could put something on the cloud, but what if the internet goes down? Bring your memory key, bring your own laptop, all those things. Check with whatever venue, if you're unfamiliar with a venue, what are their backup options in case things don't work. Bring a printed version. You know, there are many worse things than, because you may well have produced handouts as well, many worse things to you perhaps presenting from paper, as long as you're not staring down at the paper all the time. And in a similar way, you don't want to be staring up at the screen all the time and just reading from the screen. That definitely turns people off. My audience look really bored, and you could be looking out at your audience thinking that, well, okay, and that's going to perhaps put you off your stride, but maybe take a closer look. It could mean engagement with some difficult material. I'm not just trying to be shiny and optimistic about this. If maybe they are bored, well, check in with them. You're there for them, and so ask them, is this not working for you? See if you can adapt to what your audience needs. It may not work, but you'll probably win points for trying. So try connecting with the audience in that way, and that can break through that wall. Particularly again if you're still feeling jittery. Another common fear is, yeah, my audience will hate me, or they are hating me. I have to say, in all the times I've presented and all the stuff I've read about presenting, this is pretty unlikely. If there is hostility in the room, it's almost certainly down to some kind of antagonism toward the topic, or maybe some other external factor, rather than you as a person. So do let go of that. Yeah, and think about what has happened before in a constructively critical way. Get some audience feedback. Practice. The more you do of these presentations, the more you'll learn. At the same time, keep on learning too. The next part of delivery, or as I've said there, pre-delivery to be accurate, and I've already said this, get to your venue early, equipment checks, you're going to feel organized and settled, positive visualization, own the space, walk around where you're going to be presenting. Deep breaths, jumping up and down, whatever works to release your nerves, as I said. That energy can really also work for you. So don't necessarily feel that you need to, get rid of it. It shows that you're energized and so on. And think about that to the last point. What on earth is the worst thing that can happen? Lots and lots of stuff around fear and how you get over the fear. What is driving that? But really, at the end of it, you might look silly if you trip up over your words. People will forget that pretty quickly. There's very little that's very bad that could happen as a result of a few missteps in a presentation. Yeah, okay. I think you're getting ready. Let's start. And start positively. Your first impressions, as I'm sure you know, count for a great deal. Your body language speaks volumes. We're live in the room now. There's nothing perhaps better, more welcoming than a lovely smile. You may well think carefully about how your tone of voice is coming across, your enthusiasm and so on. And one thing that people do lots of times, and you have probably been told about this or advised about this as well, it's very easy to go hell for leather and speak very quickly and try to get through the presentation very, very fast. Bring it down. Slow the pace. That will help you also feel more in control and think about what you're saying. Your first impressions definitely do count. You don't have to have said anything before the audience has clocked you, decided whether they, quotes, like you. Again, it's not personal, but be open and welcoming in how you start. Use eye contact to connect with a couple of audience members. If it's a big crowd, a big audience, then you might just want to focus on the one or the two, or a kind of a good midpoint, a few rows in. You may well have, because you got there early, you may well have met a few audience members, and that would give you a chance to personalize things as well. Shake people's hands. Sorry, I'm going back a bit here to the pre-delivery. But if you've done that, that will also give you additional confidence as you start out. Yeah, use hand gestures. Do look at the whole room. I find, certainly when I started, I think I always used to sort of hang out, if you like, on the left-hand side for some reason. I was very much a left-hand side of the room bias. You don't need to run up and down the length of whatever stage or platform that you have. Certainly not. That's going to be too distracting. But make sure that you are taking in the audience as you make your presentation. Of course, ensure everyone can hear you. And again, that goes back to the pacing of it as well. If you're going too fast, it's going to be difficult for the audience to catch what you're saying. Keep on smiling. Now, some of the opening words. Thank the audience for being there. Obviously, give you an introduction, and give them a reason to trust you. Now, this also can. The process for that can have started if you can get introduced by somebody that the audience feels already has credibility, then that can be a very powerful thing too. So getting them on your side by using the person who introduced you is often a powerful tool. Yes, why am I here? What do I want you to learn and leave with? How will we get there? What's your plan for the session? How long will it take? All of these things, if you're clear up front, if the audience has a real roadmap, if they know that you know where everything's going and where they're going to go, they're going to feel a lot more confident. You may have been to a presentation where one of the first things the presenter says is, I've been asked to do this at the last minute, so sorry if it's not great, or I'm really nervous, or I hope you'll bear with me. Something like that. That is a definite no-no. It's all downhill from there. Expectations are instantly lowered, and they will not be raised. In the moment, it's easy to think that saying something like that, confessing those things, are kind of a way of getting the audience on your side, possibly a passive-aggressive way. Surely they'll be sympathetic to my plight. Well, absolutely not. No, they won't. They're expecting some golden gifts to drop from your mouth, not a miserable mumble that the next hour is going to be bum-numbingly dire. So you really need to be positive from the outset. Tell them what you want them to remember first, then clearly and briefly explain how they'll do it. Here's where you set minds at ease by being clear and concise and telling them how the session will run. And depending on how you feel, questions can be handled as you go along. Or you can make a clear, polite request to jot them down and save them till later. If you start positively, you're going to stay positive. And we're going to look at how your certain aspects of body language will affect. So, with delivery, it will come down to sometimes those initial expectations and those initial impressions, I should say. Like and trust. Do your audience feel good about you? And your body language and tone of voice will greatly influence their feelings. Practice will help you develop your natural style. And very often when you're starting your presentation, if you are commanding and somewhat powerful, almost like a power pose, if you can practice something like that, somewhere private obviously, then that can be very good too. You still need to be authentic though, and it's probable that your style will develop over time, so don't stress if you feel ill at ease the first few presentations that you make. It's going to be a lot about the practice. Enthusiasm, absolutely, that comes with your energy, but be careful not to distract. So if you're waving your arms around, then that's probably going to distract people. Your hand gestures can be a very powerful way of not just illustrating your presentation, but also I think there are some theories there of how appropriate hand gestures can help enhance and embed the learning that the audience takes away. But if you're waving your arms everywhere, that's really not going to aid any learning at all. At the other end of the spectrum, if you're sad for whatever reason, angry, you're irritated, these will come out too. So again, practicing that smile will probably help with that. And your tone of voice, how you speak and how quickly is crucial, of course. And we mentioned that. I mentioned that just a slide ago. You don't want to hear a one-note performance or be so rushed that people can't focus on anything. Change your volume, your tone when looking to emphasize a key point and slow things down. I think it all comes back to awareness, and again the principle of mindfulness and being in the moment, genuinely in the moment, and ignoring all other distractions. A few brief words on your main content in terms of delivery. As I've said before, give your most valued message early on. Develop the content using a variety of relevant methods and styles, whether that be a story, statistics, images, possibly interaction. You might have limited opportunity to do that. Again, depends on exactly what you're presenting, how many people you're presenting to. And again, keep awareness of your audience and yourself. Think about your body language as you're going through and adapt accordingly. Finally, the last part, you've got to stay strong in all ways, in your voice and your body language. Don't let the presentation just fizzle out. Everything that you've been doing throughout and at the beginning, that's still all crucial stuff. Come back to your opening message. What did you promise? Show them that you delivered. Bring things together, or maybe ask some questions, throw some questions out. What's again? That's back to your purpose. Are you looking to then engender some kind of debate? Perhaps there's a follow-up session. As I say here, a question could initiate action that you want them to take. Now, the next slide is going to help you, I hope, continually refine your presentation performance. So, thinking back on your delivery, and if you've never done it before, this is going to be hard, but in previous presentations, what's gone well, what's been less successful, that was hard to say, or utterly traumatizing. Watching other presenters is sometimes very beneficial. Who do you really love? If you've ever watched a TED Talk, there are some obviously amazing speakers out there. You know, picking up little bits and pieces of how they deliver, that could work for you. Again, it comes back to being authentic though. But it's so valuable to invest some time in looking at your performance. Reflecting on that can often bring really good insights. An impartial observer is often useful for that too, although that can bring an extra layer of nerves in. If you've just gone through it, or even maybe just before, what on earth is driving, you know, if you've got a strong level of fear, what's driving that? Write it down. These are only thoughts, it's not actual reality. So get it down on paper, challenge those thoughts. Again, seeing what the worst it possibly can be, and then that will help diminish those until they eventually fade away. Some suggestions around reflection. Look at what's gone well. Look at ways you can incorporate more of what you're good at, again, more of what you're good at into future presentations. Things that haven't worked out so well, what's less successful, well, analyze how you're going to deal with that differently the next time. Do not beat yourself up just because you had, as I say, a couple of missteps or one bad presentation. And, you know, define bad. I mean, that's going to be different for everybody. Experience will count for a lot. I've said that before. But when it comes to recognizing what might go wrong, and dealing with it when it does. The more you do make presentations, then the easier that will become too. And keep on learning about that stuff. Okay, a quick summary of delivery. Right, yes, you're probably glad you didn't go to my school. So delivery, the ACBs, it didn't really work out ABC, at least not in my mind. So awareness, your connection, and bottom line. Awareness, non-verbal communication has a huge sway when it comes to other people's perceptions of us. This is all about delivery, remember. You must learn to tune in to what your body is expressing. Being aware of your audience and their needs is crucial. As a result of your excitement or adrenaline, your anticipation, I didn't say fear, it might be tempting to ignore your audience and focus on you, on just getting the presentation done. That's going to be a mistake. Whatever you've taken in terms of preparation to get to the point where you're feeling confident, that's going to be key. Keep track of time in terms of awareness. Rehearse so you know when you need to be at certain points. Clarity, connection, contracting. Have a chat at the beginning, introduce yourself if you don't know the participants. That's going to help your nerves. Will also give you confidence as you begin the presentation if you can make a personal connection or reference. Establishing yourself at the beginning as someone with integrity. This is going to make a very strong impression in terms of and connection with your audience. And as I said, if you can get introduced by somebody who is already known and credible with your audience, that will make a big difference too. Yeah, drawing up a contract. So if your presentation is perhaps a little bit more interactive, discussing with the audience, albeit briefly at the beginning, what it is that you're going to be doing, and are they in agreement with that? There you go. You've already got the setup there for a relationship built on trust. It helps both you and your audience because you can share the responsibility almost. There's additional engagement there. I understand you might say something like this. I understand that you would like to learn about improving sales. Is that right? Are there any specific things that you'd like to see covered? I just gave a very general example, but that again is checking in with the audience there. Now, you might have a sweaty palms moment if someone suggests something that you haven't included. However, not really a problem. Explain that as a result of your research beforehand, you'll cover these things, and then additional material can always be provided at a later date. Even if you can't swing that tanker around, demonstrating that you care enough to ask will give you some grace points. I think the bottom line here is telling them your key message at the beginning and then reinforcing that through your main contact. That's a tried and tested method of making sure that engagement is there. Okay, as Julie mentioned at the beginning, this is a presentation that happened a little while ago. So the next slide was all about your questions. Which I think we may come to. And then this is the very end part. So what now? Okay, remember this. If you remember nothing else, you need to prepare thoroughly. Ask, plan, create, rehearse. Know your audience, your objective, your structure, your content. Be yourself and you'll be fine. I know you haven't forgotten that already. So if you've spoken to the people you'll be presenting to, or relevant ones in the organization, you'll know what they want. You'll have asked them good questions, all part of your preparation. If you've created the content carefully, planning it first, and aligning your words and images to the message with lots of space to breathe, if you practice what you want to say, not to memory, but to familiarity, and if you've got to the venue early with your backups prepared, check that everything is working, All you need to do is be yourself. If not, people will know that you're faking it. So think about what you bring that's different to anyone else. Now, as a final piece, if you'd like to do some thinking around this, what am I going to do now? As a result of this presentation, I'm going to, and if you could, please make it a SMART objective. And if you feel so inclined, email me. There's my email address at the bottom. Let me know what you want to think about and what you might do differently in terms of your presentation as a result of viewing this today. I'd love to hear any kind of thoughts, comments, questions after you've gone through this, and yeah, it'd be lovely to hear from you. Now, almost my last slide. I did promise that there'd be some resources, and they're here. So as you appreciate, there's lots and lots and lots of stuff online. This is a small selection, some of the things that I found useful and have referred to at throughout the presentation. Do remember one thing: with access to all this information, it's very easy simply to get caught up in all of that. And at some point, perhaps sooner than you think, you'll have enough, and you need to crack on and actually get the structure and get the content together. So try not to disappear down the rabbit hole with all of that stuff. Okay, thank you very, very much. It's been my pleasure to be here, and thank you for being social entrepreneurs. I salute you. It's been a lot of fun, and as I say, please do get in touch if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. That was really great, and I'd also like to thank you again for joining us again today to record the webinar and for your expertise. I'm sure our listeners will now be able to add pizzazz to their own presentations using the skills, structures, tips and techniques that you've discussed today. So once again, thank you. And all I've got left to say is enjoy the rest of the day. So once again, thanks, David.